In 1992, while the world was still celebrating the end of the Cold War, the heart of Europe was witnessing the bloodiest tragedy of the 20th century. A once mighty federation of 24 million people completely disintegrated within just a few short years, leaving behind devastation and over 140,000 corpses. This was Yugoslavia's endgame. But what's truly shocking is that the seeds of this disaster had been planted 50 years earlier. Few people realize that Yugoslavia carried a fatal genetic flaw from the moment of its birth. In 1918, as the smoke of World War I cleared, the Kingdom of Serbia eagerly swallowed up the state of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs, forming the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. What appeared to be a grand unification of Slavic peoples was actually a massive political gamble. The problem was that this unification was completely dominated by the Serbs. They controlled the military, police, and core government departments, while other ethnic groups were marginalized from day one. Even more dangerous was how the borders were drawn with complete disregard for ethnic distribution. Croatia had 600,000 Serbs within its borders, Serbia contained 500,000 Croats, and Bosnia was an ethnic melting pot where no single group held an absolute majority. This design guaranteed future tragedy, but that wasn't even the scariest part. What happened during World War II planted even deeper seeds of hatred in Yugoslavia. When Nazi Germany invaded, Croatia established a puppet regime, the independent state of Croatia, and began systematically exterminating Serbs. At the Jasenovac concentration camp, the Croatian Usage organization brutally murdered nearly 100,000 Serbs, Jews, and Roma using horrifically cruel methods. The Serbs weren't about to take this lying down. The Chetnik organization launched retaliatory massacres against Croats and Muslims. And Tito's partisans, despite preaching multi-ethnic unity, also participated in political purges. Throughout the entire war, over 1 million people died in Yugoslavia, most killed in ethnic massacres between different groups. These blood debts were deliberately buried after the war, but the seeds of hatred had already taken deep root in each ethnic group's collective memory. In 1945, Josip Broz Tito used his unique charisma to temporarily diffuse these contradictions. This Croatian-born communist leader possessed remarkable political talent. He created an intricate system of power balance. The 6 republics took turns chairing the federal presidency. Each ethnic group maintained its own language and cultural autonomy. And even the Yugoslav People's Army was strictly recruited according to ethnic quotas. Even more brilliantly, Tito positioned Yugoslavia as the leader of the non-aligned movement. By playing between the American and Soviet camps, Yugoslavia secured Western economic aid while maintaining relative independence. This gave Yugoslavs a strong sense of superiority. They believed they were freer than the Soviet bloc and more united than Western countries. But Tito's success actually planted an even bigger time bomb. By overemphasizing each republic's autonomy, he was essentially nurturing each ethnic group's independence consciousness. The 1970s saw Yugoslavia's economy experience miraculous growth. GDP grew at 6% annually. Per capita income ranked first. In Eastern Europe, and Yugoslav passports could enter 128 countries visa-free, making it one of the world's most valuable passports at the time. Belgrade's stores were packed with Western goods, and Zagreb's cafes buzzed with discussions of the latest European fashion. However, this prosperity masked a fatal problem: extremely unbalanced development. Slovenia's per capita GDP was 7 times that of Kosovo. Croatia's industrial output accounted for 25% of the national total, while Macedonia and Montenegro remained poor and backward. Even worse, the wealthy northern republics began complaining that their wealth was being used to subsidize backward regions. The Slovenians did the math. They generated 20% of the national GDP, but only received 16% of federal investment. Croatians were even more furious because most of their tourism revenue and industrial profits were handed over to the federal government. This resentment quietly fermented beneath the surface unity. Few people realized that the 1973 oil crisis was the real starting point of Yugoslavia's collapse. Skyrocketing oil prices plunged this heavily import-dependent country into crisis, with inflation soaring to 25%. Even worse, to maintain living standards, Yugoslavia began borrowing heavily. By 1980, Yugoslavia's foreign debt had reached a staggering $20 billion, equivalent to 20% of GDP. The debt crisis forced the government to cut investment in backward regions, further exacerbating regional inequality. When the economic pie stopped growing, the distribution battles between ethnic groups became a fight to the death. But the real disaster was still ahead. On May 4, 1980, Tito died in Ljubljana at age 87. His funeral became the grandest gathering in Cold War history. Delegations from 128 countries attended, including for kings, 31 presidents, 22 prime ministers, and 47 foreign ministers. The entire world mourned the passing of this legendary leader. However, Yugoslavs quickly discovered that Yugoslavia without Tito was like a magical kingdom without its wizard. The new collective leadership system couldn't handle complex ethnic contradictions at all. Even more fatal was a fundamental flaw in Tito's institutional design. Any major decision required unanimous agreement from all republics, effectively giving each republic veto power. Under economic crisis, each republic began going its own way. Slovenia pioneered market reforms. Croatia followed suit. While Serbia stuck to the planned economy model, Yugoslavia began splitting into different economic zones. In 1981, massive protests erupted in Kosovo. This autonomous province within Serbia had 1.8 million people, 90% of whom were Albanian. They demanded Kosovo be upgraded to the Seventh Republic, touching the most sensitive nerve of the Serbs. For Serbs, Kosovo wasn't just a piece of land, it was their ethnic holy ground. In 1389, Serbian Prince Lazar died in the Battle of Kosovo, a defeat that Serbs viewed as the beginning of their national suffering. For 600 years, Kosovo held Jerusalem-like status in Serbian hearts. But reality was harsh due to birth rate differences. Albanians had already become the absolute majority in Kosovo. Serbs felt they were losing their ancestral land, and this fear quickly transformed into hatred. Conflicts began escalating. In 1986, a banker named Slobodan Milosevic became the leader of Serbia's Communist Party. The seemingly moderate technocrat quickly displayed stunning political ambition. He shrewdly realized that nationalism was the only tool that could bring him power. In 1987, when Milosevic visited Kosovo, he said those history-changing words to angry Serbian crowds: "No one should beat you." This statement instantly ignited Serbian ethnic emotions and marked the end of any hope for Yugoslavia's peaceful dissolution. Milosevic was a master at manipulating public sentiment. He organized a series of protest activities called Rallies of Truth, where hundreds of thousands of Serbs took to the streets, demanding direct control over Kosovo be restored. These seemingly spontaneous protests were actually carefully orchestrated. Political theater. Milosevic's political methods were breathtaking to behold. He exploited Serbian emotional attachment to Kosovo to gradually seize control of Vojvodina and Montenegro. By replacing leaders in these regions, Milosevic effectively controlled 4 out of 8 votes in the federal presidency. gaining the power to veto other republics' resolutions, even more sinister. He began reinterpreting Yugoslavia's constitution. He claimed that since Serbs were Yugoslavia's largest ethnic group, they should enjoy special status. This rhetoric completely infuriated other ethnic groups, especially Croats and Slovenes. In 1989, Milosevic delivered his famous speech at the 600th anniversary commemoration of the Battle of Kosovo, facing 1 million gathered Serbs. He declared, "Serbs will never again be defeated by anyone." These words echoed across the Balkans, foreshadowing an even greater storm to come. Slovenian and Croatian leaders realized that staying in Yugoslavia would only mean Serbian domination. In 1990, Slovenia held its first multi-party elections, electing Milan Kukan as president with the campaign slogan "Slovenia First." Croatia followed suit, electing Franjo Tuđman as president. This former Yugoslav People's Army general had complex political positions. He not only questioned the scale of the Holocaust, but also openly praised certain policies of the independent state of Croatia. This further intensified opposition with the Serbs. The two countries began secretly coordinating independence plans. They established contacts with Western countries, seeking international support. Germany promised to recognize both countries' independence at the appropriate time, giving them enormous confidence. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991 brought down communist systems throughout Eastern Europe. This had enormous impact on Yugoslavia. Communist parties in each republic either collapsed or transformed into nationalist parties. After ideological bonds snapped, only economic interests and military deterrence held Yugoslavia together. But economic crisis made interest distribution irreconcilable. While Milosevic's controlled Yugoslav People's Army couldn't simultaneously suppress independence movements in multiple republics. In Croatia, the 12% Serbian population became the biggest problem. Fearing discrimination in an independent Croatia, they formed the Serbian Autonomous Oblast of Krajina, demanding reunification with Serbia. This set the fuse for the coming war. In August 1990, Serbs in Croatia launched the Log Revolution. They used fallen trees to block roads, preventing Croatian police from entering Serbian-majority areas. When Croatia sent armed helicopters to restore order, the Yugoslav Air Force deployed fighter jets to intercept them, threatening to shoot down Croatian aircraft. This was the first time Yugoslavia's federal army openly confronted a member republic, marking the complete bankruptcy of the federal system. The Croatian government realized peaceful independence was impossible. Only force could solve the problem. Both sides began secretly arming themselves. Croatia purchased weapons from Hungary and Germany, while Serbs received support from the Yugoslav People's Army. The Balkans were becoming a massive arms depot. On June 25, 1991, Slovenia and Croatia simultaneously declared independence. The Yugoslav federal government immediately sent troops into Slovenia, attempting to control borders and airports. However, the 10-day war's outcome surprised everyone. The well-equipped Yugoslav People's Army was defeated by Slovenia's territorial defense forces. Slovenia's victory encouraged other republics. Macedonia held an independence referendum in September, with 99.9% of voters supporting independence. Bosnia's situation was more complex. 43% Muslims, 31% Serbs, and 17% Croats had completely different views on independence. On March 3, 1992, Bosnia officially declared independence. This became the bloodiest chapter in Yugoslavia's dissolution process. Serbs within Bosnia immediately declared the establishment of Republika Srpska. Refusing to recognize Bosnian independence, Sarajevo was quickly besieged, beginning a siege that lasted 1,425 days. The brutality of the Yugoslav wars shocked the world. In Bosnia, Serbian armed forces conducted systematic ethnic cleansing of Muslim civilians. In the Srebrenica massacre, over 8,000 Muslim men were executed en masse. This was the worst ethnic massacre in Europe since World War II. Croatia didn't have clean hands either. In 1995's Operation Storm, 200,000 Serbian civilians were forced to flee Croatia. Throughout the 1990s, the Balkans became a living hell. The international community's response was slow and powerless. UN peacekeepers could only watch helplessly as massacres occurred, and NATO airstrikes had minimal effect. The Bosnian War didn't officially end until the Dayton Agreement was signed in 1995. But seeds of hatred had already been planted in a new generation's hearts. On February 4, 2003, the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia officially dissolved, renamed Serbia and Montenegro. This name change marked the complete disappearance of the Yugoslavia designation. But even this downsized federation couldn't last long. On June 3, 2006, Montenegro held an independence referendum with 55.5% of voters supporting independence. Serbia became the last of Yugoslavia's 6 republics to become independent. But it was no longer that ambitious federal core instead. It was a landlocked small country surrounded by hostile neighbors. In 2008, Kosovo unilaterally declared independence, gaining recognition from the United States and most EU countries. But Serbia refuses recognition, and this dispute continues today. Yugoslavia's tragedy teaches us that once ethnic hatred is exploited by politicians, it unleashes devastating power. People who once united at the Olympics to bring glory to their country could become mortal enemies. Within just a few years, Sarajevo had hosted the 1984 Winter Olympics, symbolizing harmonious coexistence of diverse cultures. But just 8 years later, this city became the center of Europe's bloodiest war. Even more thought-provoking is that Yugoslavia's dissolution wasn't inevitable. If the original institutional design had been more reasonable, if economic development had been more balanced, if politicians had chosen compromise over confrontation, this tragedy could have been completely avoided. But history has no what-ifs, only bloody lessons. Yugoslavia's story reminds us that beneath civilization's veneer, seeds of savagery never disappear. When economic hardship, political turmoil, and nationalism converge, humanity's darkest side reveals itself. This isn't just a Balkan lesson, it's a warning that all humanity should remember.